Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. We are back to estate planning of the rich and famous, where we chat about celebrities in their estate planning. Today's episode is on my girl, Whitney Houston, who, in my very personal opinion, is one of the greatest. I personally think it's impossible to hear a Whitney song and not dance. Or maybe that's just me, but I don't think it is. As always, let's talk about Whitney personally before we dive into her estate plan, or lack thereof. According to Whitney's Wikipedia page, Whitney met R&B singer Bobby Brown, and that's Bobby with a Y, which will be important here in a second. And they met in 1989, and after 3 years of a relationship, Whitney and Bobby got married in 1992. 8 months later, they welcomed a child, a daughter specifically, named Bobby with an I. So I hope I don't confuse everyone. We've got Bobby with a Y, who's the husband, and Bobby with an I, that's the daughter. They did not have any other children besides Bobby. However, according to her Wikipedia page, in 2006, Whitney and Bobby separated, and Whitney ended up filing for divorce. The divorce was finalized in 2007, and Whitney was granted custody of Bobby, their daughter. Bobby was, of course, still a minor at that time. A couple years after the divorce was finalized, Whitney sat down for an interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2009 and disclosed that she, during her marriage and even after Bobby was born, had been using and abusing drugs. As the Oprah interview concluded, Oprah asked Whitney if she was currently drug-free, and Whitney stated, quote, "Yes, ma'am. Don't think I don't have desires for it," end quote. Unfortunately, in early 2012, specifically February 11th, 2012, Whitney was found unconscious and submerged in the bathtub in a room at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. The cause of death was reported to be, quote, "drowning in the effects of heart disease and cocaine use," end quote. The LA County Coroner's Office stated that cocaine was actually found in Whitney's system, along with a few other drugs like Benadryl, and Xanax. I think everyone was sad to see she did indeed have cocaine in her system. So sadly, Whitney's past drug use and abuse resurfaced, and she was using again. According to a New York Times article, Whitney's sister-in-law and manager, Pat Houston, who was actually subsequently appointed as Whitney's estate's executor, said something that I think is really important for us all to remember about Whitney. Pat shared, quote, "Before she passed, there was so much negativity around the name. It wasn't about the music anymore. People had forgotten how great she was. They let all the personal things about her life outweigh why they fell in love with her in the first place," end quote. I think that is a really beautiful thing to say about Whitney, that things occurred in Whitney's personal life ended up getting plastered all over the tabloids, yes. It's like some forgot how talented she was. She was a human being that had issues, deep issues, but that doesn't take her talent away. So anyway, following her passing, according to a blog by Safe Estates Law Group in Tennessee, it was discovered that Whitney left a last will and testament, but it had not been updated since 1993. Thankfully, she did at least do an estate plan following the birth of her daughter, Bobby, so at least we were not working with nothing, right? So under Whitney's will, she had left her estate to her daughter, Bobby, in a trust which stated that once she hit 21, she would receive 10% of the trust. Then at 25, she'd receive another distribution, specifically 1/6 of the trust, which is kind of a weird amount, right? And then the remaining trust balance would be distributed to her once Bobby hit 30. And I'd love to see what Whitney did in her will, that she thought about staggering out her daughter's inheritance. I do this all the time for my normal people clients. I always tell them, I know what Jenny would have done with money at 18 or 21. And while I was a really good kiddo, I just truly didn't understand what a dollar meant at that age. And I would say most kiddos don't, to be honest. In an unfortunate, tragic, and completely surprising turn of events, Whitney's daughter, Bobby, passed away in 2015 at the way too young age of 22 years old. What's so crazy and sad is that Bobby eerily passed away in a similar setting as Whitney. Bobby was found unconscious in her bathtub, but sadly, she was in a medically induced coma for nearly 7 flipping months before she died. With this happening, people have started wondering and asking, okay, so who gets Whitney's estate then? According to Thompson McMullen, a law firm in Virginia, the only way to answer this question is to break the estate in kind of 2 parts. This is what I mean by that. So because Whitney's daughter, Bobby, was beyond the age of the first distribution, so when she hit 21 and was entitled to 10% of the trust, that portion that Bobby received depends on whether Bobby herself had a will. If not, it would go to her closest heirs, meaning either her father, Bobby, with a Y, or perhaps her partner, Nick Gordon, which that brings up a whole weird issue as well. Nick Gordon and Whitney's daughter, Bobby, they often refer to each other as husband and wife, but unless Nick can provide that they actually were legally and officially married, which most people do not believe is the case, Nick really has no standing, and everything would likely go to Bobby's father, Bobby with a Y. Though because we live in such a litigious society, it's possible that Nick pushes the issue and tries to make a claim on Bobby's estate and perhaps ends up receiving some sort of settlement. Who knows? There was even some whispers that Nick possibly had a role in Bobby's passing, and if that can be proven, he probably won't receive anything at all, including even a settlement. When I referred to a second ago about who gets what in Whitney's estate being kind of split in 2 parts. So we've got this first part that we just talked about that was distributed out to her daughter Bobby. But that other part, however, is the estate assets that were still being held in trust for Bobby, but had not been distributed out. According to that same Thompson McMullen blog post, that part is estimated to be around $18 million. Whitney's will stipulated that if her daughter died, unmarried, and had no children, the remainder of the estate would go to Whitney's 2 brothers, Michael Houston and Gary Garland, and Whitney's mother, Cissy Houston. Beyond the issue of who is getting what, there were even other issues going on too. Like we have talked about in past episodes before, the IRS sometimes gets a little right up in celebrities' business, it seems, especially after they pass away. And I think this actually happened to maybe Prince's estate or Michael Jackson's estate. Pretty sure Aretha Franklin's estate too. Anyway, according to the Safe Estates blog, the IRS challenged the value of Whitney's estate in May of 2016. And specifically, the IRS challenged the value of Whitney's royalties, residuals, and image. So again, like Prince and all of them, we're talking about that kind of intellectual property idea and how much it is worth. So the IRS wants to be paid an additional $11 million in taxes and penalties from Whitney's estate. And the estate, of course, disagrees with the IRS's position. You know, reflecting on Whitney's estate plan, it sure could have been worse, yes. But it sure could have been better for sure. And I don't think I can summarize it any better than Thompson McMullen's blog post. They said this, and I totally agree with it. Quote, "Some have suggested that Whitney Houston's estate planning could have been better. Houston's will set up what is known as a testamentary trust for her daughter. This is a trust created by a will, meaning that it does not avoid the need for probate, and it becomes a public document. Houston could have accomplished these same goals through a living trust, which would have kept the provisions of the trust private because it would pass outside of probate." End quote. Yep, I agree with whoever wrote that blog post for you, Thompson McMullen. Totally agree with it. Sadly, because of all of these issues, Whitney's estate is still going on 10 years later. So, for example, as I was doing my research for this episode, I stumbled upon an article that said it was released 51 minutes ago. And that's from when I was doing my research, so not right now. And it was talking about how a song was discovered by Whitney that was never released. And the article explained that the song was written by Whitney when she was a mere 17 years old. When she was merely 17 years old. Anyway, so the estate sold the song on December 14th, 2021, and I'm recording this on December 16th. So 2 days ago, the estate sold the song at auction for $1 million. So that, of course, will be flowing through the estate. And yeah, so things are still very much going on nearly 10 years later. Because remember, Whitney died in 2012. And we're really close to 2022 if you didn't pick up on that. Or say like a few months ago, I stumbled upon another article that in October of 2021, Whitney's estate announced a collaboration with MAC Cosmetics. Pat Houston, and again, that was the individual appointed as the estate's executor. She was Whitney's sister-in-law and manager. But Pat said the following, talking about the announced collaboration. Quote, "The idea that is coming to fruition now is something Whitney always wanted to do. I'm pleased we can do something that I know she would have loved. We're just starting on this collaboration, but exciting things are coming." End quote. But what you should really understand about this announcement is that this collaboration too will probably yield money and it will flow into the estate, just kind of like this new song that got found. Again, almost 10 years after Whitney passed away. A lot of moving parts, I tell you. Alrighty, let's wrap this episode up, shall we? Next week's topic is a cautionary tale. So that's a real life case that I or my office have personally worked on. And most of the time, these are lessons to be learned for when you do your own estate planning. So tune in next Tuesday for a brand new episode. And until then, Legal Tea listeners, take care and be well.